As we enter into sacred time, breathe with me a bit and be present in this moment now. Enter these doors to worship, not to escape life outside these doors, but to embrace life more deeply. Enter this sanctuary not to find safety, but to discover wholeness. Enter this community not to change it, but to be changed by it. Enter this moment now and be surprised by what can be called holy. A life lived more deeply, an action taken from wholeness, a community living its faith in the world. Enter and let us worship together. Please join in a responsive reading which is found at the back of the gray hymnal, number 568. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground. More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar. Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving.
Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in. A thicket perennial wilderness to outside, but to us interconnected, rather runs furrows and layers.
Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen.
Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in.
This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always.
For every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes.
The reading today comes from a book, Other People's Myths by Wendy Doniger, who was one of my professors at the University of Chicago. This reading is a variation of the theme from the children's conversation. It's about other people's myths, but I think it also applies to interactions with overseas versions of our global Unitarian Universalist faith. So here's how the reading goes. Taking other people's myths seriously ultimately means recognizing that they are our myths, which means not only that they have a general meaning for us, but that they narrate the stories of our lives. There is a treasure for each of us to find in other people's myths. Foreign myths tell us things that no one else knows, strange things that are truly strange, things that our own myths never dreamed of. But they also tell us what seems strange in our own myths, and even in our most private dreams, may not in fact be so strange as we fear they are. And finally, they tell us things that we will not listen to from our own myths. Foreign myths may provoke a shock of recognition. Once we have learned what is other about other people's myths, we are equipped to turn our lights back upon ourselves, to photograph the cameraman. Gazing into them as into a shop window, we see the faces of the strange figures posed inside, and superimposed on their faces, we see the reflections of our own faces looking at them. The myth that we thought was just a window turns out to be a mirror, too. It's a great joy to be back here and to see all of you and to see what has unfolded in this church in the years since I was first here. I'm especially grateful to your minister, Reverend Laura, for inviting me in and for being so open to the possibility of rekindling a partnership with Petroshine. I also thank the folks that have spent much of the weekend with me. I'm truly, truly grateful. So our faith calls us, I think, as Unitarian Universalists, to work to make the world a more just, peaceful, and compassionate place. I live in St. Louis, where there is plenty of work to do along that line. The intersected problems of racism and poverty, leavened by a flood of guns, continue to shatter many lives and many hopes in the city where I live, currently the murder capital of the United States. I expect that maybe it's not quite as dramatic, but there's plenty to do right here in this part of Texas, too. So with so much to do in St. Louis and the Dallas Metroplex in the United States, why even think about Unitarians and Unitarian Universalists around the world? Why should we be concerned about Unitarians in Petroshine, Transylvania, or in the hills of Northeast India, or on 2 of the 7,000 Philippines islands? Well, perhaps one reason we should care is because Unitarians overseas maybe need us to save them. And this actually was the main impetus for the rebirth of the partner church movement in the early 1990s. Romania, which has tens of thousands of Unitarians in its Transylvania region, had just emerged from the terrible ordeal of Ceausescu's communist rule. The Unitarian Church had been harassed and marginalized in every way imaginable. And I've heard a lot of stories about the countless ways, and there's one that really struck me during a recent visit to Transylvania. There's a chapel in the Unitarian Church headquarters that has maybe 20 busts of famous, noteworthy, landmark Unitarians in Transylvania around the perimeter. During communism, a curtain was hung over those busts, and it was illegal to remove that curtain. If you did so, there could be terrible consequences for you and the church. And of course, people there endured far worse things from Ceausescu than that. I mean, I saw a village once that had been flooded by some phony hydroelectric project. In truth, it was a Unitarian and Jewish identified village that Ceausescu wanted destroyed, and he destroyed it. But those covered statues in the chapel hit me. It's such a palpable symbol of how our Unitarian kin in Transylvania had to deny their rich heritage, had to deny who they were, had to deny their beliefs. You can imagine what it would be like here if for a period of time your chalice had to be covered, or the beautiful circular medallion in your lobby had to be covered for decades. So the Unitarian Church struggled mightily during communism. Perhaps the greatest calamity was that it lost schools and church buildings and other property without compensation. The overthrow of Ceausescu did not necessarily mean things were happy ever after for our Unitarian relatives. There was no guarantee that they would get that seized property back. What property they had kept had fallen into disrepair on the whole. The years of oppression, too, had sown a deep distrust of one another. In Romania, during Ceausescu's time, 1 in 3 people were informants. In the Unitarian Church, there were informants. They were not immune to that. And then finally, the truth remained that our Unitarian kin, even after Ceausescu, are doubly minorities. They're ethnic Hungarians in Romania, and they are Unitarians among the ethnic Hungarian population, which is overwhelmingly Catholic. So oppression from the ethnically Romanian-dominated government has continued in some ways, and prejudice from some of the majority Catholic Hungarians has continued, and so that did not all magically stop when Ceausescu was overthrown. So it's not a stretch if we look back to the early 1990s to say that the very survival of the Transylvanian Unitarian Church was at stake. Enter American Unitarian Universalists. We had a sense of the precarious moment that our Unitarian kin were in, and we felt moved to help. There's very few things that Americans like so much as to charge in and be the saviors. So in we charged, full of good intentions, deep love, and open wallets. And I have no doubt that we helped. For one thing, we cared. That's a pretty huge gift for a long oppressed people. We also did offer badly needed financial resources to take on some of the projects, rehabbing some of the buildings that had fallen in disrepair, for example. I also suspect that more than occasionally we charged in and did what we thought they needed to have done, and by virtue of our financial might, we probably called too many shots. There's a great story about a church that gave a tractor to a village. Seems like a good idea. They were using hand tools to plow in the fields, most likely. But the villagers couldn't figure out how to share the tractor. They had really had a lot of distrust over the years. And eventually, they realized it was easier just to let the tractor sit and sell it. Sometimes we didn't know what was best. And the idea that we Americans could save Transylvanian Unitarianism came from a good heart, but in hindsight, it was also patronizing and arrogant. And actually, it wasn't true. The only people who could save Transylvanian Unitarians were Transylvanian Unitarians. And actually, they had saved it over and over again for 450 years. They didn't need us to save themselves. So saving Transylvanian Unitarianism really is no longer a viable motive for partnership. So either we find a different motive or we're going to walk away. And if we choose to walk away, it won't be the first time. There were some partnerships that began in the 1920s between North American and Transylvanian congregations, but then with the Depression and World War II, we forgot about them and walked away. They didn't forget about them, and I think it's fair to say that since early 1990s, our partners have been waiting, wondering when we would get bored and walk away again. Well, I fear the time is now. And there is so much to do here. And what does the connection with some ethnic white Hungarians in Romania have to do with Black Lives Matter or all the problems facing our city and our country? I fear that we may walk away now, and that this may be a strange liberal variation of Trump's America First. So why stay engaged in international partnerships? Why re-energize your partnership here? I'm going to give you a few reasons. To put it crassly, I'm trying to answer the question, what's in it for you? Well, first of all, partnership can deepen and broaden our American UU faith. So many Unitarian Universalists have little knowledge about the roots of our faith. And when this is the case, I think our faith cannot help but be too shallow. It's too easily upended. There's no roots to it. Partnership with the Transylvanian Unitarian Church is a powerful antidote to this, because Transylvania is the most important historic wellspring of our faith, going back 450 years. We're not some brand new faith out there. We have very deep roots, particularly in Transylvania. Well, that kind of rootedness from partnership actually happened to the congregation I served in Northeast Wisconsin in Appleton. My congregation, like yours, was a relatively new congregation, and I don't know about yours, but ours was pretty disconnected from our faith history, at least when I arrived in 1990. And not coincidentally, I think, we were largely inconsequential in the life of our city. I think we needed deeper roots to become truly a force in our community. We encountered those roots in our partnership with a congregation in Transylvania. And getting rooted helped us build a stronger foundation for our faith, and again, not coincidentally, we began to make more of a difference in Appleton. Partnership with Unitarian Universalist congregations across the world can also help us better understand the breadth of our faith. For example, let's face it, a lot of Unitarian Universalist congregations in the United States, the people in them, a lot of them share the same ethnicity, class identity, high level of educational attainment. Well, this is not the case in most other places where Unitarianism exists around the world. So my former congregation encountered this breadth of our faith in our partnership, especially with a Philippines congregation. That Philippines village we were partnered with was largely made up of subsistence farmers who lived in bamboo huts. And for us, being with them and figuring out they really are Unitarian Universalists in a different way from us, but still UUs, well, maybe we need to rethink how exclusive we feel like our faith is, that it really only probably works for this certain demographic in the United States. Philippines Unitarian Universalism blows that idea out of the water. Our faith is so much wider than we thought. So we discovered in that little Philippines village on the other side of the world that we actually had potential to grow in ways we hadn't understood right in Appleton. Sometimes, as the story went, you have to travel far to find what is near. A second reason to engage in international partnership is that in doing so, it can help you grow spiritually. Interacting with siblings in faith and recognizing that their version of Unitarian Universalism has core similarities to our version and is also different in some fundamental ways, that actually is illuminating spiritually. It causes us to question, to adapt, to deepen our own Unitarian Universalist faith. So an example from my congregation in Appleton that I served. So probably 2/3 of that congregation was former Catholic. It was a heavy Catholic area, and where you have a lot of Catholics, you usually have a lot of ex-Catholics, and we appealed to them. Many of them brought in with them some powerful, unresolved feelings about their former religion. Well, one Christmas several years ago, the minister of our partner church from Transylvania was visiting, and I invited him to lead a Transylvanian Unitarian-style communion service at one of our 4 Christmas Eve services. I figured with the 4 services that day, anyone really bothered by the idea of communion in a Unitarian church would just pick one of the other services, and everything would be cool. But to my surprise, when I looked out at the congregation at that communion service, there were a lot of former Catholics there. Many of them told me later that curiosity compelled them to come. As I looked out at a few of them, sitting there like that, I had the sense that they came with the expectation, maybe even the hope, that they would be offended. So neither of those two parties, the people that were curious or the ones hoping to be offended, had any intention of participating in the communion. Well, much of the Transylvanian communion service looks and feels like a typical Christian communion service. But underneath it, it is thoroughly Unitarian in theology. It focuses on remembering Jesus' teachings. It honors Jesus as a person, but not as a divine being. There's absolutely no sense of body, blood being present in the bread and the wine. There is no sense either that the main point of the story is that God sent his son as some sort of blood sacrifice. Well, for some Catholics and former Catholics in attendance at the service, this juxtaposition of a familiar ritual with completely different theology just broke open something in them. And most of them came up and participated, many with tears flowing down their face. The Transylvanian communion ritual had unexpectedly brought them an important moment of healing and wholeness. It was a gift of partnership. Encountering a distinctly different version of our faith can cause us to see new truths about ourselves and about our American UU faith. Another reason to engage in international partnership is that it can help us do the work of justice and compassion here at home. Partnership can help us learn how to journey with marginalized people, not to lead them. We had to learn this in Appleton in order to be effective in our own community. So we had to swap some of our arrogance for humility in order to be effective in Appleton. Nothing prepared us better to participate in Black Lives Matter than our journey of mutual international partnership. From those partnerships, we knew that it would be ineffective and even wrong to charge in with all the answers. Part of the congregation's mission was to be a leader in social justice, and we learned from our partners that sometimes that looks like following. And with Black Lives Matter, we needed to follow, not lead, our black neighbors in Appleton. So we had begun to learn those lessons, and we could apply them to an important social justice movement right there at home. So another great thing about partnership is that it can be a powerful illustration that we are all related. This interdependent web we talk about is really there and really true. So can someone lift up one of the hymnals with the hymnal covers? So see that? That's from your partner church, yep, in Petroshine. And you find those in Appleton, they're all over the world. It's a great reminder that we're connected. At some point, the partnership in Appleton got the idea that we should make American hymnal covers for our partners. So now if you go into the partner church in Transylvania, you'll see American hymnals covers. So they're reminded. See, in partnership, you jointly enrich each other's lives. In fact, you figure out that you belong to one another. I belong to Transylvanian Unitarians. They belong to me. We're family. It's a powerful thing. So today I want to commend international partnership to you and urge you to consider jumping into your partnership with Petroshine in Transylvania, and also encourage you to be open to how it might deepen and help you grow your faith, how it might help you do justice work right here in this part of Texas. It's not a substitute for justice work here, but it is a complement to it. You will learn things from your partnership that will help you here. So sometimes one must travel far to find what is near. As you peer inside the seemingly exotic window in Transylvania, you will see yourselves superimposed on that window. The window will become a mirror, and you will learn about yourself. You've had a relatively long relationship with the Transylvanian congregation that goes back actually before the rebirth of partnership in the early 1990s. There was a minister from Petroshine who fled, sought asylum in the United States, and you were the people that helped him and his wife resettle here. Like any organic relationship, your partnership needs consistent care. It also, frankly, needs new people to get involved in it so that it can stay fresh and alive in the life of this church. If you are not involved, and most of you aren't, and I suspect a lot of you didn't even know you had a partnership, I encourage you to consider getting involved. There's a very tangible step you can take today, right after the service, is you go into the fellowship hall. If you have any inkling that you might want to get involved in this and have your life enriched in ways you can't even imagine, there's a first table on the right where you can sign your name, maybe put your email address or phone number, and say, I'm interested in this. You're not signing on to a committee that's going to meet every week or month, but you are saying you might be interested in one way or another. You know, maybe you're interested in helping organize a trip there. Maybe you're interested in helping youth connect with youth over there. There's lots of ways to get involved. So I encourage you If you have any sense that this might be a good thing for your journey in your church, to stop there and sign your name. So Horizon friends, now is not the time, in my view, to walk away from our Transylvanian kinfolk so that we can concentrate on America first. Now is the time to double down on international partnerships. The world needs partnership, and who knows, you may even need partnership. Thank you.